So this morning, what we're going to do is focus on an overview of Daniel chapter 3. And keeping in mind what we have been studying for the last few months, and last Sabbath study was focused on the law of life and the law of death, and that the moment Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, fear came in. Agape love and fear are two antithetical laws or principles. They are diametrically opposite to each other, so there's nothing that is a link between fear and God's agape love. With that in mind, we're going to read through Daniel 3 and go do a quick overview of some of the highlights.
Daniel chapter 3, starting with verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried out aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship the image shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace."
So keep in mind so far that all the elite of Babylon were called to bow before this image. And then if you didn't, the consequences are clearly stated in verse 6.
Verse 7. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
This can also apply to all of us, that a time will come if Jesus and his love and the love that he has revealed of the Father, if we in any way, according to what the world will want, which is represented by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, if we deviate in any way and don't conform to what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is promoting for us, the same thing will happen.
Verse 8. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I made. Good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?"
So what we've read so far, we must keep this in mind. How what we have read can apply to us individually or even corporately. See, if we follow the sequence, we have to be very careful that we don't go into the domain of what these officials did and went and reported to Nebuchadnezzar what was going on to try and harm another group of people, which were the three Hebrews. We have to be extremely careful. See, we read this and we totally miss the significance of what is involved. If we, in any way, with whatever agenda, and we might think, even we might use a spiritual agenda, we might say, well, we're using the Bible. You can use this Bible and harm people in ways that will be far worse than what the world would do. And we have to be very careful that we don't do that, because when we are doing that, we are promoting this false god, this image that Nebuchadnezzar had built.
Verse 16, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter."
Now think of this. These three men were so settled in what they knew, in their relationship with God, that nothing was going to change them. Even before he could finish, they told him exactly where they stood.
"If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace."
Note here, pay particular attention to that first portion. If that is the case, what do you plan to do? If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. They are so settled. Doesn't matter what happens. Our God can deliver us from this fiery furnace. But look at what they said next.
"And he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up."
Think of this. Here they are. Irrespective of the consequences. If it works, and if God comes through, fine. If God doesn't come through, for whatever reason that we don't know, it's not going to make an ounce of difference in our stand. We will not compromise and worship this image. Now, here, these three Hebrews might not have had the kind of revelation that Jesus came and gave to the world. But they had enough of a revelation that they hung in there with the truth that they believed and did not in any way deviate from worshiping the true God. Keeping in mind that where they came from, when they were taken captive, the Jewish people were involved with what? All kinds of false worship. They were involved with worshiping idols and other things. But here, with these three, see what they had stated. Go ahead.
Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more, than it was usually heated.
Now, dear ones, this has been our experience, and I can only talk for myself. When we are so focused and not compromising in the truth and stating what we believe that Jesus Christ has taught us from the scriptures, this has been our experience with this kind of a fury develops in people, and you look at their face and the way they will come at you, like, how dare you believe what you believe? And this is a fact, and this doesn't come from non-Christians. These were from Christians.
And he, Nebuchadnezzar, commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Now there it again, the people that were responsible for putting them into the furnace got consumed. And here these three guys are going into the furnace.
And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God."
So when we are so grounded in understanding God's love, God's character of agape love, through the revelation of Jesus Christ, when we are so firm in that belief, doesn't matter what kind of an attack, even though they'll heat that furnace 7 times hotter than it's supposed to be and attack you from all sides, because of your firm belief in the God of agape love of the world, not a destructive, vindictive type of God, but a God of pure love that doesn't want anyone to perish, that went to the cross to prove that he didn't want anyone to perish. That is the kind of God that we are worshiping.
Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God."
So what ends up happening when we, by faith, in this God of love, and allow that love to work in our lives and live it out more than anything else, dear ones, when we live out that love, then people will see that love and will want to do what? Come and become a part of you, part of your belief. They will want to know the God that you are worshiping and believing in. Why? Because they see something that is so radically different to everything else that is around them. And they want to be a part of being in this kind of a movement that has this kind of a love for God.
"Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap. Because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
So here, one of the tragedies, even though they saw this beautiful thing that happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Nebuchadnezzar was still locked in with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil principle. And he wanted to force people to make sure that you worship this God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were worshiping, okay? We have to be very, very careful that we never become a part of that kind of a mindset. That we force people that if you don't conform to what we believe, you don't do what we want you to do, then we are going to find some way to make sure you are punished in such a way that you are punished that you will conform to what you want. And I'll say this with no question whatsoever. All false religion believe exactly this way. They say we are worshiping the true God, but they will use force, violence, coercion, or whatever it is to force people to conform to what they believe God is like. And that is where Nebuchadnezzar, even after this experience, is there. But as we're going to study, Nebuchadnezzar will experience a major change in his life.
Oh, yeah.